What is the purpose of art? That's a broad question. It's different for everyone. Different according to the circumstances, and for some it's an exploration, for some it's an expression. Sometimes its purpose is to advertise for the better cola. Sometimes its purpose is to capture the likeness of a loved one. That's what it is here. Welcome everybody, this is Wes. Welcome to the show. Today I'm watching a painting I did not too long ago of a commissioned pet portrait. This is Clark on the left. This is the very early stages of a painting on the right. And what you'll notice is it's very odd looking. Don't panic, this is normal. It's just the start of the painting. I'm not sure if I'll play the whole thing in real time or if I'll speed it up in the middle. But I know some people prefer to see it in actual time, so I thought I'd at least start it that way. So there, in just a few seconds, maybe almost a couple of minutes, I've kind of captured the first quick take of the dog. Is it perfect? No. What it does for me though is it gives me something to correct in the next stage of the painting. So I've included you can see the tail, the outline of the basic outline of the body. I even have an eye in there and the start of a nose and the mouth. They aren't perfect, but that's not the point of it. The point is to put something down on the canvas, something to be able to alter later on in the painting process. So this is a commissioned painting. The idea is to get the image to look like this particular dog, not the dog breed, but this particular dog. And it's tricky because any photograph you take of a loved one is just an instant in that loved one's life, and it's not the actual loved one. And sometimes if you catch them at the right angle at the right time, it may not look exactly like them. And it's not the camera lying to you, it's just we're not used to seeing a person frozen in time all too often. So, at least from my perspective, I try not to get hung up on the exact details, but to try to capture close enough to the essence of the dog in this case as I can, to where when you see the painting and you know the dog, you would recognize that this is some portrayal of that particular animal. I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't get hung up on getting it exactly right. I've said this a million times in my videos, but if they want it exactly right, they'd get a photograph. A painting is more of, there is a bit of expression and a bit of artistry involved, and although you want to capture that individual, you still have to keep it as a work of art, if that makes sense. So these early stages, especially with pet portraits or people portraits, anytime you're trying to capture an individual, these early stages are generally just horrific to look at. As you can see, I'm going in with some reds, even though we're not dealing with a red dog. But it's just warming up. I'm finding those areas where it's a little redder than the lighter areas. I should say a little darker than the lighter areas. Just as an indicator, as a starting point. And then I'm kind of going back in with a little more orange, which is a little closer to the color. And I'm kind of blending that in with the red to tone down the red while it's still wet. We don't have to do it this way. You could let that dry completely, but this is just what I chose to do in this case. So in a sense, this stage is, since I've got the painting completely filled with paint, the next stage, which is what we're on, is starting to play with the color and along the way perfecting the shapes a little closer to the image. And just kind of taking my time with it and trying different things. Some things will work, some things won't work. It's a stage of exploration, we can call it. I'm spending a lot of time looking at the image on my cell phone in this case, and then trying to get what I see on the phone onto the canvas. Funny part about it is you can't really see all inaccuracies at once. You kind of have to pick and choose what you're looking at, what you're focusing on, and work just one thing at a time. Now I'm already using a small brush at this stage, which normally I resist doing. But because this is just an 8x10 canvas, such a small image, and most of the details are small because of the size of the image, it just makes sense to go ahead and use the small brush, because I can cover most areas pretty quickly with it in this case. But normally I try to prevent myself from moving to a smaller brush for as long as I can, because the details can get in your way if added too early in the painting process. But here it's not so much details that I'm dealing with, I'm just adding color using a smaller brush. So I'm basically finding an edge and I'm slowly moving along that edge as best I can to get the shape right. The viewer might see details like that line of blue on the top of the head there, which isn't a line, it was just left from the underpainting. I'd started with a blue canvas. and that just happened to be left there. But it's because when you're doing the painting, you're focused on only one thing at a time. Details like that I'm not even focused on yet. It's obviously going to be fixed later on, but as I said, you can only focus on one thing at a time. So at the moment, I'm focused on that right side and trying to get the hairs going the right direction there, and these sorts of things. This part of the dog, the proportions are a little off, and I fix it later on. But one way to do this sort of thing is to have a more detailed drawing to begin with, more measured. And that's probably the more logical and possibly better way to do it. I usually don't, because I'm just itching to get painting usually, and I enjoy the exploration part of the painting, where where anything could happen, where I could find a new interesting shape or texture or whatever, and then I tend to fix it as I go. And it's just kind of what works for me. I don't recommend that everybody do that. I'm not sure if it's a mindset or just the way that I've learned painting. But I know most instructors would probably tell you to start with a detailed drawing, or at least make sure the main elements of the painting are in the right locations on the canvas, that sort of thing. Part of why I don't mind is why I don't mind fixing it later on in the painting process is because it does allow me to experiment more in the beginning, and also those corrections can be interesting once they're done. As far as, maybe you keep something a little off kilter just to make the image look interesting, or maybe the fix creates a little more interest than doing it correctly the first time would. It's kind of an element that you can't quantify ahead of time. An unpredictability. This painting was actually pretty straightforward for me. Didn't present too many problems except for the aforementioned out of proportioned bottom part of the canvas, which just kind of got away from me early on. But I pretty much just went step by step and did a lot of it just with this brush, this smaller liner brush, laying in the colors pretty much as they are in the photograph. The color I'm using there mainly is raw sienna, which is like that orange color on the back, mixed with some white to give it that tan color. And if I wanted to dull it a little bit, I'd add maybe some burnt umber, which is just a brown. And then it's a matter of balancing it out, figuring out, is it too orangey? Is it not, does it need more brown? Does it need less of that? And so I kind of bounce back and forth throughout the process here. I think that maybe is one of the things I've learned in my experimentation with painting is it's interesting to go to the extremes with color, especially acrylic, because acrylic dries so quickly and you're working in layers very often. It's often better to just lay down some bright, bold color choices, and then you can always fix it, subdue it in later layers of paint. That's why I've gone in with that bright orange, which isn't in the photograph exactly, but placing that down and then covering it back up in the next part is just, for me, it's just both a fun way to do it and a way that leads to interesting accidents of the process. Some of these areas I'm working on, I'm not even sure if this is part of the ear down there or if that's just the way the fur grows, the hair grows on the head. Sometimes working from photographs, that's just the nature of it. You just have to go with what you see in the photograph. So if it's just a brown line there, you just try to put the brown line where it goes. And I've actually had photographs before where I've gone through most of the painting process, and not until nearing the end did I realize what a particular shape was in the photograph, because I couldn't make it out. But because I just stuck to that idea of painting what I see in the photograph, it actually became clear what that thing was in the painting, which was, I don't know, it's almost a revelation when that happened. I wish I could remember the details of it, but I just remember just how surprised I was that I was able to do that after painting it. So here this tongue color is obviously way too red, but and sometimes you don't realize it until after you lay it down on the canvas, but I'm pretty sure I fix it right after this. Yeah, dulling it down closer to the photograph. In dog portraits, I've noticed that there's often a stage where you get to, which is probably around this stage now that we're looking at, where you have, well, before this stage, you've kind of reached a point where you realize you're painting a dog, like just looking at the image that you've painted. And then by this stage, you suddenly recognize what breed the dog is. But it's after this stage, after a bit more finagling and getting it closer to the photograph, and finding those nuances in the shapes of the eyes and the shapes of the shape of the head and the nose, etc., that you finally get to that individual dog. So it's kind of a progression from dog to breed of dog to that particular loved one. So at this stage, we're looking at the breed of the dog, and we're not quite to that particular dog yet. But that's part of this, process. The hardest part about talking about these paintings in these videos and my process in doing it, the hardest part is not just putting it into words, what's going through my head, but it's even before that. It's realizing what is going through my head. I can't often articulate that very well because it's something I've just done for long enough where I've internalized it, and just kind of become part of my painting process. And it's just hard to explain, I guess. A lot of it, especially at this stage of the painting, is in that I've heard it called flow state, or it's just this highly focused state where time seems to go away for you as you're painting. And you just don't, your environment disappears, everything around you disappears, you're just kind of focused on doing the thing you're doing. And so it's that part of the brain that's active, that I guess the right side of the brain, the more creative, intuitive side, and putting that into words, into the left side of the brain, so to speak, the logical word side, is difficult. And I think the best that anybody can probably do is, come up with these analogies or just guesses at what is going on. And it's something that the creative side isn't perhaps thinking about. They're just doing it. I see that darker patch below that the right eye as we're looking at it. It's not in the photograph. There's a slight indentation where underneath the bulge of the eye, but that just goes to show you that when you're working on it, you're really looking at specifics, and that's just one specific that I either haven't looked at or just haven't gotten around to fixing. But I'm pretty sure I do pretty soon. Using a blue there because in the photograph that highlight on the nose is blue, although you can't see it very well in this shot. The photo is a little out of focus, but that's not a big deal. So the highlight in the eyes and on the nose is not as pronounced as it is in the painting. But again, that's just a choice, a creative prerogative, I guess, that I've just chosen to do. And if I don't like it in a later stage, I can decrease the brightness, subdue it. If it helps, then I'll keep it, that kind of thing. I think I just ran out of things to do there, so I'm kind of futzing with the grass a little bit. I generally want the grass in the far back of the photograph to be lighter, less distinct, that sort of thing. So here I'm back with my classic choice in these moments, the China markers, which is a wax pencil. It's just my way of going in and correcting if I needed to find where things went wrong. So there I've located where that part of the anatomy is just too low compared to the rest of the body on the dog. Okay, I'm speeding up the painting here. This is pretty much the end of the video. This one's slightly longer, just showing more of a real-time painting process. If you'd like to commission a painting of your own, you can find a price list on my website at wessf.com. If you have any ideas for future subject matters for my paintings, I'm open to new ideas, so leave a comment. Let me know. Leave a like below. Thanks for watching.